Hello, and welcome to 805 Focus, where you learn the latest updates on our wonderful nonprofits in the Santa Barbara area. My name is Greg Gorga, co-host for today, filling in for the wonderful Cinder Sinclair. And when I'm not in this chair, I am the executive director of the Santa Barbara Maritime Museum. And with me today is Don Barthelmess from the Deepwater Diving Monument Projects. Welcome, Don.
Thank you, Greg. Thanks for having me.
Great to have you here. In the interest of transparency, I want to mention that Don is a board member of the Santa Barbara Maritime Museum, a past president there, and the Santa Barbara Maritime Museum acts as the fiscal agent for the project you're going to hear about for donations. So Don, tell us about what is the Deepwater Diving Monument and why is this happening here in Santa Barbara?
Well, this is actually a project that myself and my colleague Leslie Laney, who are volunteering for this, came up with this idea to erect a statue, a bronze statue, which you see here before you. This is a miniature version of it, to erect in the Santa Barbara Harbor to honor the city of Santa Barbara as the birthplace of deepwater diving technology. Very few Santa Barbara's know about the history of deepwater diving that was born here primarily back in the 1950s and 1960s by our working divers in the Santa Barbara Harbor, primarily the abalone divers and the fishery divers from back in the day.
Mm-hmm. And that abalone and fishing diving evolved, right? Especially here in Santa Barbara, but all over the world due to oil, right?
Well, yeah, oil was part of it, but primarily it's due to our position with the Channel Islands. Now, if we turn the clock back about 13,000 years, really the first divers in Santa Barbara were the Chumash Indians. And they used to dive for abalone because they used the iridescence of the abalone shell as their money. That's their currency that they traded for back then. They also used the shells. They plugged the vent holes in the abalone and they used them as dishes. Mm-hmm. They made regalia and all kinds of different things ornamentally out of the abalone shell. If you fast forward a couple thousand years, you had the Japanese, which dominated basically the abalone industry, starting in Monterey, Morro Bay area, and then they soon filtered down to Santa Barbara, where there was a plethora of abalone beds. And they harvested those abalones. World War II broke out. And I think everybody knows that the Japanese were sadly interned into camps, and that's when you had the Caucasians enter into the abalone diving business. But as far as the diving technology goes, the British really pioneered compressed air diving in the United States. They had the big heavy gear helmets, which you see, the old Navy divers wearing those, and that has evolved since the advent of heavy gear diving into the more modern superlight helmets, which very few people don't know are made right here in Santa Barbara. Diving Systems International, Kirby Morgan Diving Systems, they had their office 425 Garden Street. They outgrew that. They have a huge manufacturing plant up in Santa Maria, and about 90% of the commercial diving helmets that are used worldwide today by the navies, by working divers, police agencies, rescue divers are the Superlight 17 diving helmets.
All designed here in Santa Barbara County, produced here in Santa Barbara County, and they've been around for over 50 years, right?
Oh yeah, Bev Morgan introduced and Bob Kirby introduced this helmet back in the early 1970s, and it is the worldwide standard today. Coupled with that, huge demand for deepwater divers, the diving program at Santa Barbara City College, where I taught for over 30 years, and as you know, I'm retired now, but we would train the workforce here in Santa Barbara to utilize this equipment and the technology associated with exploring our oceans, harvesting abalone, working on boats, working in the oil fields, anything that has to do with underwater, a working diver would do.
Yeah. And what are the other key moments that came out of Santa Barbara in the deepwater diving history?
Well, if you go back to November 3rd, 1962, there was an abalone diver by the name of Dan Wilson, who he knew that the work that was taking place right in our channel was moving out because the continental shelf gets very deep very quickly here offshore. So soon the diving companies and the contractors that were doing the work found themselves in 300-400 feet of water. And for the audience out there, a lot of divers probably understand that diving air at 300 feet is pretty much out of the question. You get what's called nitrogen narcosis. So it's kind of like having a couple of cocktails at Harry's Plaza Cafe and deciding I'm going to go diving. Can be very, very dangerous. So this gentleman, Dan Wilson, he knew that the United States Navy was using what's called oxyhelium, or heliox as it's called today. They take the nitrogen component out of the air and they put in the helium, which is non-narcotic. And so the divers could go deep, they could stay longer and have a clear head and do tasks on the fly underwater. So that all started by Dan Wilson doing a demonstration dive out at the east end of Santa Cruz Island using Brooks Institute of Photography students. Brooks Institute was just up the road, and he proved that this could be done using this heliox mixture, and it soon spread worldwide.
And became known as the Santa Barbara Helium Rush worldwide, right?
The Santa Barbara Helium Rush. Right.
And then Dan had another big invention that moved deepwater diving forward.
Yeah, and it happens to be sitting on the patio of the Santa Barbara Maritime Museum. It's called the Purisma Diving Bell. It is the world's first commercial lockout diving bell, where we could take an engineer and put him inside this diving bell and keep him sealed up at 1 atmosphere pressure, just like we are in this room. Down below that, there was another sphere where a working diver could exit and pressurize the bell, and he could exit and lock out of the bell, as we call it, and go out in the water column and actually perform useful work. So that was a real first, and that led to the development of more advanced diving technology and diving bells, and then 1 atmosphere diving systems evolved, all because of these abalone divers in Santa Barbara. They really sparked a major interest in the deep sea commercial diving markets.
And that abalone industry was so big back then, and it was good money back then. So we had the best divers really in the United States were coming to Santa Barbara. A lot of them ex-Navy divers, right, to do that work.
There was a mixture of divers. These divers, they all shared several things in common. And number one was they were used to working in harsh environments offshore in various different weather conditions. So they were used to being underwater for long periods of time. The second thing was they knew their equipment. They knew marine engines and compressors, and they could fix things on the fly when they're out offshore. They didn't have hardware stores out there where they could go and buy certain components that they needed. They were able to innovate and create things and kind of be a MacGyver as far as the equipment goes. But the last thing that they understood was they understood that diving is just a means to get to a work site and get a job done and turn a profit. And that's what the abalone divers all knew and understood. So they were well positioned to make these advancements in diving technology.
Sure. And led the world in a lot of this technology.
They sure did lead the world. After Dan Wilson's historic dive in 1962, proving that civilians could use this proprietary technology of helium diving, it rapidly expanded worldwide. It went over to the North Sea, where they were drilling for resources and oil over there. It went to Saudi Arabia and Egypt and South America, Gulf of Mexico, where it still exists today. So yeah, the birthplace of Santa Barbara, our hometown, right here, is responsible, and that's really why we're doing this monument. All these pioneers who used to be daily visitors into the Maritime Museum, they used to come speak to my classes. It's kind of like having Henry Ford come in and speak to your automotive class when you have a Bev Morgan or a Bob Kirby come in and speak to your class. Mm-hmm. They're all gone now.
Yeah. And Ladd Handelman, another big one.
Ladd Handelman, he's a Santa Barbara icon, the great Ladd Handelman, a very good friend, chairman of our advisory board. He passed away several years ago during COVID. And so Leslie and I really decided that we need to do something to honor the city and honor these men and women that built this industry. And there's a lot of people. It's not to any one individual, it's to an entire industry and our working harbor, which is still a working harbor today.
Absolutely. And where is this monument going to go and how big will it be?
Well, it's going to be installed just outside the Breakwater Restaurant. We have full city approval. We have the backing of our waterfront department, our wonderful waterfront director, Mr. Mike Wiltshire. He's been a godsend for us. When we first approached him, he steered us in the right direction through the various committees. We initially went to the Arts Advisory Committee, and then we got unanimous approval for this concept. This is a gift to the city of Santa Barbara. Everybody likes that, where we're not spending taxpayer money. So we're fundraising for this, and it's gotten rave reviews from all the city commissions, architectural board review, and here we are. So we're in the fundraising mode, and we're doing this by selling miniature versions. This is a 22-inch version of the actual monument. The monument is being constructed as we speak. The scale up of the foam, our artist is Greg Platanovich. He is world renowned. He did the sculpture of Ronald Reagan at the Reagan Library. Very, very high end. And if your audience can see this working diver from the 1980s, the detail on the Superlight helmet is phenomenal. Many of my colleagues have looked at this with a fine-tooth comb, and they are just blown away by the detail that exists in this statuette.
It is amazing. So one way to fund the final monument that you're working on is the selling of these statuettes, right? Which they can go on your website and find, all right? And then a portion of that goes to the construction of the monument, and they get this beautiful statuette for their home, business, wherever they want to be.
That's correct.
And
Greg.
the final monument will be how big?
Final monument is going to be 7 feet 6 inches tall, sitting on top of a 2-foot base. So you're looking at just shy of 10 feet. But for your audience, a normal human being, this is going to be a scale about 1.1 times the size of an actual human being. It will be monumental, as we say.
And designed so people could walk around it, see it from all sides.
Yes, ABR was very specific about that, handicap accessible. We're going to have it lit at night, shining up on the monument with a timer. No night sky violations or anything like that, but plenty of room for people to walk around, take selfies next to it, admire it. Greg, in my opinion, we had the dolphin fountain done in 1980, and that was a very, very big deal. And it sort of marks the Santa Barbara Harbor with the dolphin fountain. I think, personally, I'm a little biased, but I think this is the biggest thing that happened in Santa Barbara since the dolphin fountain. Mm-hmm. It's public art. We all love public art, and there's no names or anything going on it. It's not to any one person, as I mentioned. It is to honor our community, our industry, the history, the marine history, the maritime history of Santa Barbara.
Yeah, which even our locals don't know about, and certainly folks visiting Santa Barbara don't know that importance that Santa Barbara played in that. And it is nice to have a bookends, like you have the dolphin sculpture at Stearns Wharf, and this monument would be at the foot of the breakwater is amazing. And then there's another way people can support this, is by just making it, if they don't want to, because the statues are $5,400, right?
They're $5,500. They're very expensive to build, and the contractor that we're working with that has done this project for the U.S. Navy, they're doing another project over in the United Kingdom. They have generously agreed to donate a portion of the proceeds of the sales towards the building of this monument. But we're also, thanks to our wonderful Santa Barbara Maritime Museum, which is our fiscal agent, as you know, we are able to accept 501c3 donations that are tax deductible in any amount whatsoever. So if you go on to the deepwaterdivingmonument.com site, you can see you can either purchase a statuette, which helps fund the project, but it's not tax deductible because you're getting something for that. But you can also, if you wanted to donate, $100, $500, $1,000, $10,000, which people have done, you can go onto the Maritime Museum website and you can just do it right online and get a tax deductible gift.
Or they can come there, get to the Maritime Museum website through your website as well.
Exactly. And the Maritime Museum has a page set up, and it's very prominent right on the front. You'll see a little yellow icon in the upper left-hand corner. Click there and it'll take you right to the Maritime Museum site. There's also a very, very high-end information on the history of the development, about why we're doing this on the website. So yeah.
Yeah, so they can get more information about the monument.
More information is there, a lot of it. A lot of videos of the sculpting, the artist's background, the history. A lot of YouTube videos are up there as well.
Yeah.
So check it out.
And you and Leslie Leaney, so I should say Leslie Leaney is the co-founder of the Historical Diving Society.
That's correct.
He's the expert worldwide of commercial historical diving, and you are both, and you have a little committee, which because I'm a member of it. None of those committee members are paid. You and Leslie are all volunteer.
All volunteers. We want to give back.
Yeah,
this
is really a gift to the city. It'll be gifted to the city, and then the waterfront department will maintain it once it's been gifted to them. But it's really a gift to our community.
Yeah, public art, and which is, I think, one of the reasons why it received the approval and the high degree of scrutiny that, because it's going to be a permanent monument to our harbor and waterfront and our city. So yes.
Yeah. And you were a little modest earlier because you did teach at the Marine Tech Institute at City College, Santa Barbara City College, but you also led that department, and you were a commercial diver yourself. How deep did you dive? What's your deepest dive?
My deepest dive is in a submersible, 1 atmosphere, was 5,600 feet.
5,600 feet. Was that a record at the time?
I don't think so. I think people had been deeper in submersibles, but I also was a Mantis pilot, an atmospheric diving suit pilot. We worked in the Santa Barbara Channel doing research with Battelle Ocean Sciences, and I did set a record there for 1,400 feet, the first live boating deep dive that was done in the channel.
Wow.
I didn't know it at the time. I was just a kid. I didn't really care.
What I like to tell people when they come through the museum to give a sense of how important Santa Barbara is to deepwater commercial diving is that we happen to be the home of the Historical Diving Society, the West Coast home for the Historical Diving Society. But we also have the Hall of Fame trophy from correct me if I don't get this right, the Association of Diving Contractors International.
That's correct.
Which honors divers from all over the world. And there's probably, I don't have the exact number, but probably about 80 names on there. They add more each year. But 11 of them, my last count, were from Santa Barbara. So 1 out of 8 of the commercial deepwater divers honored on that trophy around the world, home based right here in Santa Barbara.
Yeah, if you look back, some of the pioneers, you've got your Ladd Handelmans, your Bob Kerbers, your Bev Morgans, your Murray Blacks, Woody Treen, another local, Mike Von Alvensleben, my beloved colleague from Santa Barbara City College, he's on that trophy. So yes, a lot of firsts took place, and that trophy really, it's the Commercial Divers Hall of Fame trophy, and it exists in the Maritime Museum. Folks can go in there and check it out and look at it. And we actually have a display of all those individuals that I just mentioned that are up there. And many of them are gone. And that's another reason why we're doing this.
Sure, to honor them, the Bob Christensens, the Whitey Steffens, and all those people who made that industry.
Oh, Bob Christensen, another mentor of mine.
Yeah.
Yep.
Well, thank you very much. This has been very informative, and I hope, and we wish you luck on this, and hope all of you will support this effort. Thank you for joining us on 805 Focus, and we'll see you next time.